following podcast is for informational purposes only. The contents of this podcast do not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Take responsibility for your own decisions, consult with the proper professionals, and do your own research.
So I would just stop right here in terms of what Web3 vision should be. And I think, the Web3, for the graph, it's just going to be the backbone of Web3. Imagine what the database is doing to Web2 and extrapolate that for Web3 and a good graph.
We're like astronauts floating in the space of time.
Welcome to the GRTiQ podcast. Today I'm speaking with Kuan Huang, founder at Scout, a no-code platform that enables anyone to analyze the protocol and dApp data on Ethereum. Kuan and the team at Scout are also Wave 2 grant recipients from the Graph Foundation for their work on Bubbletea, among other things, and we discuss all that during our conversation. Kuan is an entrepreneur at heart who made a move from Web 2 and a successful career in mobile to Web 3. During our conversation, Kuan shares his story of moving from Web 2 into Web 3, being an entrepreneur in the crypto space, his Wave 2 grant, and how it helps developers working in the graph, and so much more. As always, I started by asking Kuan about his background.
So I studied computer science back in college when I was still in China, and then moved to the States for graduate school. I studied interactive art at NYU. So I was trying to become an artist after school, but in New York City, it's very difficult to become an artist and get paid. So I went back to what I was doing as a software engineer. So worked for a couple of years at startups, and then caught the entrepreneur bugs, and then decided to start a company. So so before joining crypto movement, I started a company called Poncho, which is a weather service. We hired a team of comedians writing funny jokes about weather, traffic to help people to start their day. So I was working on that for a few years, and then luckily the company got acquired. So after that, I was just looking for things to work on. And I think it's around late 2017, a couple of my very smart friends, definitely smarter than me, they start working on crypto. And at that time, I did not know anything about even Bitcoin. But then they said there's this thing called Ethereum. You have to pay attention to it. So I happened to have some time. So I flew to Cancun, Mexico in 2017 for the DevCon 2. I think it's 2 or 3, I forget. That was like mind blowing. I mean, I've been working in a traditional startup Silicon Valley style ecosystem for a long time. And then when I went to Cancun, the conference was basically filled with, hippies and anarchists. It's like going to a Burning Man with your clothes on, right? Nobody knew who the hell I was. I mean, at least, in my previous life, someone knows me. I raised money, hired people, and got on press. But when I got into the blockchain world, nobody knows about me at all. So I was like an intern, just joined Google on the first day. And it was mind blowing seeing everything people are discussing, all these things I never heard about. So that's how I got into crypto, and the rest is history.
As you mentioned, you're from China, and China within the crypto space has quite a loud voice. It seems like a lot of the news and a lot of the markets respond to China. So my question for you is, as someone that's from China, how do you think about that role and that system in the greater crypto space?
Yeah. So certainly, so China is a very special place. So I think in the short term, it's not that bright. I think, crypto is disrupting. And I think American system, as much as you see how people hate American government, American system on Twitter, I think America has set up in a way that is actually good for these bottom-up disruptive innovations. And you have seen that happen in the past 50 years. And an American system is not afraid of disrupting itself. And as much as, I just think people just hate their government, Americans hate the government on Twitter. So I think it is really great for happening in this American system. Now, in terms of China, China is not a system set up for this type of innovation. But eventually it catches on. If you look at the internet, I mean, at the beginning, people are like, wow, you're going to build a wall for internet? Well, look, it's working. It's working. There's a huge internet economy works in China. And there's so many top technology companies in terms of market cap are based in China. So I don't think China is going to miss the entire blockchain revolution. But I think short term, there's a regulatory risk. But I think as long as Chinese Communist Party figure out a way to maintain its order and authority, they will embrace blockchain. Maybe in the midterm, longer term, it just does not make any sense to me that they will miss this revolutionary opportunity, especially when you think about many other countries are benefiting, embracing it. And if you look at the politics tension here, US and China, I mean, if US is getting ahead, there's no way China is going to fall left behind. They're like, we don't want to look bad. We want to capture the opportunity to compete with the US. So I think in the midterm to longer term, China will be there. I mean, as a matter of fact, China has never left. If you go to the ground, the people are still building stuff. They're just not broadcasting it. I mean, if you're part of like a WeChat group, people are still building technology there. You just don't see that many. Actually, as a matter of fact, there's something positive coming out is you don't see that many scammers promoting their tokens. But actually, technology, they never left.
So what did you recognize in Ethereum in those early days? Did you see opportunity or did it just raise more questions?
I definitely saw that. First, I had lots of questions and I couldn't really wrap my head around what is a decentralized a blockchain. It took me like a few weeks to actually truly, I think I can understand it without like just throwing terms people don't really understand, like truly sort of start to understand it after 6 weeks, like digging deep into the white paper and the yellow paper. I think also there's another paper and then just, actually running a node, writing code to sort of understand what is going on. So it took me 6 weeks. I'm majoring in computer science. So imagine people who don't have a computer science background, they're just reading news, CoinDesk, try to understand blockchain. That would be even harder.
So at some point you have this epiphany where it's more than just something you're interested in learning about. It becomes something you decide to make a professional passion. What was that inflection point?
That inflection point was after I came back from the Ethereum conference. I'm pretty obsessed with all the technology that's built around Ethereum. I mean, it's a very slow blockchain. So there's nothing compared to what people are used to in the Web 2 world. But I start seeing this underlying change of how technology is being built. I was like, wow, that just sort of reminds me of 2017 when mobile starts shaping up. Actually, I got into mobile in 2004, 2005, before the real smartphone came out. So it was on Nokia phone. I was still a student. I was using Nokia phone. It was the latest smartphone back then. It was extremely slow, but you start seeing how Google Map was running on the smartphone, how people can posting things, writing blogs, journals on a mobile phone. That was mind-blowing at that time. Although it's extremely slow, terrible user experience. There's no applications. Developers are complaining about it. And that was the same feeling I had back in 2018, where that was like, okay, this is exciting, but there's just not too many things you can do, and it's extremely difficult developer experience. But I was like, okay, since I've been through in mobile, well, it's probably something worth betting on. So I decided to actually get in. And I'm also lucky I just didn't have anything to do at that time.
As somebody who has an educational background as a software engineer and did a lot of entrepreneurial builds in the Web 2 space, how do you explain the difference between Web 3 and Web 2 to people that don't have that background?
Well, it's just there's so many ways I can compare these two spaces. I'll just tell you what just come to my mind. First is, you are seeing a new generation of entrepreneurs, developers, investors, marketers, like any professionals just coming to or starts emerging this space. That same thing I saw back in mobile, where you have just a new generation of people coming to mobile. People fresh out of school, people who never a really big name VC, who not a famous celebrity, like, I don't know, content maker, but they just, jump in because everything was sort of reset the table, and then people can just starting from scratch. So that's the new wave of people coming in. And it, like, especially in a moment like this, it doesn't matter what you have accomplished before. Now everyone's sort of starting from the same starting point. So that's just a fantastic moment. Second is, I think the second is this culture thing is sort of going back to this very less corporate, more early builder culture phenomena that I saw in the mobile as well. So that's sort of two things just that came to my mind. I'm sure there's so many details I can go into.
So you make this decision to move into crypto, and you see the potential of building on Ethereum. So what happens next? Do you start a company? Do you start building apps?
So we start building this analytics company called Scout. So it's basically starting in late 2018. We basically just look at I sort of coming from previous background, look at everything that, hey, this is a new thing, Web3. Nobody knows it. But to understand that, you just, everybody's going to need data to understand what the hell it is. So, and every wave, look at the Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Every time there's a new wave, there's always analytics products needed. And it always change every couple of years, right? You look at mobile in 2007, 2008, you look at a mobile app store was created. And then company like Flurry, like Google Analytics, they came out around 1 or 2 years after these app stores. So when there's underlying infrastructure change and the data that's generated from the applications that's built for the infrastructure will just grow exponentially. So we said, me and my co-founder CJ, we just said, okay, let's build an analytics company. So raise the money. Had a good run in 2019 when we were the first one out there. And we were charging companies, it was good. Until there's a company called Do Analytics. They came out, they provide analytics for free. Then we're just seeing our revenue jump. So I think so that's what we did. And then, but at that time, that's how in 2019, I also learned about the graph, because there was a VC friend asking me, hey, they're raising money. Should we invest or not? So I looked at the graph. I was like, well, they are solving a problem. That's for sure. But I don't know how long it's going to take them to solve this problem, because, it takes 20, 30, maybe 40 years to build a modern database that we're using today. Because that's how I see, the graph is a database for Web3. So it's going to take a long time for them to be able to reach a big crowd. But they're solving a problem that's happening in the space, and I can feel it. I think most companies, including us, are using a centralized solution to deal with it. So, and also I don't know if that problem, the indexing problem, will be solved by the node itself. So that was sort of two questions I had. But I said, if it's a bet you're making, I said to the VC, if it's a bet you're making, you should probably invest. I don't normally give investment advice.
I want to talk more about when you found the graph and some of the work that you've contributed in the ecosystem. But before we do, I want to make sure listeners understand what Scout is. You were one of the first movers on providing analytics. So what type of analytics were you providing, and how is that different than something like Google Analytics on Web 2?
So the analytics we provide is basically all on-chain data. So it's specifically for Ethereum blockchain. So we basically synchronize the node data, putting to a centralized database, and then just passing through all the raw transaction data on Ethereum. And then on top of that, combining with information from smart contract, people can actually find different needs for that. Some people looking for the application usage on the blockchain. Some people looking for the fundamentals of a token. Some people looking for, the investment opportunities. So there's so many different things people can look for, but we provide a sort of just, in a simpler way to explain it, is just organizing the Ethereum blockchain data, putting to a modern database for people to query. So that's what we do. Comparing to Web 2, like say Google Analytics, I think there's a lot of difference. On a high level, let's sort of break it down to two parts. First is technology part. Technology part is if you ever build a web application, mobile application, the way you do analytics tracking is you embed a snippet of code into your application. When someone uses your application, that code will send a pixel or some signal to a centralized database controlled by this company. And then they tell you, oh, somebody click a button, somebody make a purchase, somebody visit a page. And then these data will be organized in a centralized database controlled by this company. And then the company will, visualize data for you to help you understand the retention of the user, the usage, the volume, everything. But if you look at it on Web3, if you build an application on a blockchain, there's no centralized database you can use. And also it's extremely expensive to send a signal through blockchain to a database because it costs transaction. So the traditional way of doing analytics tracking just doesn't work. And plus, all the data is sitting on one single database, which is the blockchain. So you can basically, you don't need the embedding code, that piece of methodology to tracking the data. So that requires a new infrastructure to synchronize the data, putting them into database, and figure out a way, hey, this transaction is this application, this transaction is that. So that's one key technology difference. On the product side, / business side, traditional analytics company charge customers if you use their service. It's called a SaaS business model. And the one of the things that keep user in your product is the switch cost. If I have already, you have already helping me collecting application data for the past year. If I'm switching to a different vendor, I can't carry over the 12 months worth of data. I have to go to a new vendor to start again from scratch. So that's one of the, what we call a business moat to help keep your customer to your business. But on a blockchain, all your history is already on blockchain. There's nothing keeps me from switching from one vendor to another one. The data is not a moat. It's not a business moat that keep me here. So that completely changes how business can be built on the analytics side in Web3. So I think that's two big difference. I'm sure there are more from different angles, but that's two things I sort of trigger me to work on this idea.
The data that's stored on chain, it's an ocean, right? It's a universe of information. Starting an early analytics company, what were some of the challenges of trying to grab that data and organize it in a way that users could interface with it?
So on the technical side, I think it was just brand new technology that we're using to synchronize data from Ethereum to a centralized database. And there's just new stuff we didn't know. There's a lot of things like, the smart contract, how you just abstract data from smart contract change over time. So you will have a piece of code work for 3 months and then a new upgrade from the node and then, it breaks. Or the node itself was not stable. It's much better now. So when you're synchronizing them, it breaks from time to time. The upgrades of the node will also break things. The smart contract upgrading will also break things. We actually look at the raw data on a very low level. So you start looking at the early code of Ethereum node. It's just so messy. You realize how certain things they did not think about causing certain way the data is organized, which is causing, difficult time to organize our end. So there's also all sorts of technical things we have to deal with constantly. And on the other hand, on the business side, it's like, first of all, we don't know who we can ask him to pay us money. Like you have a decentralized team, don't have a very clear role. Like who should pay us money? We don't know, like, okay, guys, what metrics do you guys need? You have people who are working on the team. There's people who work in the community. We don't know who is who. You're like, hey, can we have these 3 charts? Okay, sure, but it's going to cost you money. Oh, really? So like, okay, who are you? Oh, I'm just a member, I would love to see this. Oh, okay, sorry guys, you got to talk to the team, right? So that's a very different sort of a sales approach when compared to traditional enterprise sales. Who, okay, this is a marketing team. This is a guy working at this company. So I think that was a very interesting sort of like surprise for me. So that's sort of, we start thinking, okay, is the old business model is going to work? And if it doesn't work, how are we going to support ourselves? So that's a business question that we were sort of couldn't answer. Now we start shifting. We hope like the graph can help us answer. So yeah, that's all these things leading us to shifting from a centralized approach to a decentralized approach.
So let's talk more about that. So you mentioned earlier Dune Analytics launches, and so that changes your orientation towards the business that Scout provides and the business model. So what happens next?
So I think, one thing, so what Dune is doing is what we were thinking actually at the very beginning of Scout. But then coming from Web 2, I know a couple company. There's a company called Wagon HQ. They basically built a social SQL query platform where the data scientists can share their queries with other people. So that company didn't work out very well because it's such a small community. So for me and my co-founder CJ was like, wow, okay, we could do a social data analytics company, but look at what happened in the Web 2 world. It's just not going to take off. So we might as well go with a traditional SaaS company. And that was the early decision we made. And then Dune just proved us wrong. So we thought, okay, so maybe the community-driven analytics might work. So we think, so if anyone has ever done data analytics, who built a data analytics company, use a data analytics product, there's sort of two components when you analyze data. First, you need lots of data index. So many that fits the things you analyze. The raw data you pull from blockchain is not going to work. You have to transform it, shape in different way to get what you want. Second, you need a way to visualize that. So that's the two very basic components. I'm sure there are more to it, but without these two, you can't do any data analytics. So, if the central today, the business model is that the company pays for all the infrastructure to index data and then provide a way to visualize it. And then they charge customers. You pay me a month, a year, you pay a certain amount of money. But what if we can socialize the cost of the data infrastructure across many different community members? But then if you are, someone creates analytics, you own that piece of data. Imagine every chart, every dashboard you create is a NFT. You own it. And then if anyone wants to consume that, use it, they will find a way to pay for it. It's sort of like a royalty you pay for a piece of music. So that's sort of how we sort of envision how this can happen. And then the graph is a perfect way to start because if I'm an analyst, I create a subgraph, which is the index. I do not need to worry about how to scale it. If this is a good subgraph, if there's a traffic, the index will do these things for me. They will take care of the traffic. And then I can, now the part that's missing is if I am a subgraph creator, how do I make money? Right? I think right now in the graph ecosystem, there's not enough incentive for people to create very useful subgraphs and then can monetize through that. Now there's something called a curator. There's a one way to sort of benefit from, but I think we need a much, much bigger incentive, more direct incentive to encourage people to create more subgraphs. Hey, can I create a subgraph that helps people to map the address of a wallet and the name? Like, is this a smart contract name? Is this a wallet name that linked to an ENS domain? Or is this some exchange wallets? Like, if there's a index like this subgraph running, I think many people are going to use it. I don't think there's enough incentive to build it because it's going to take time to maintain, to update, because some of the information can be pulled from chain automatically. Some of them coming from off chain. Some of them you have to maintain all over time. So like these high quality subgraphs don't exist. I think there's lack of business model here to make that happen. So I think we would like to fill in these blanks here to create an incentive to create high quality index on top of the graph.
The GRTiQ podcast is made possible by a generous grant from the Graph Foundation. The Graph Grants program provides support for protocol infrastructure, tooling, dApps, subgraphs, and community building efforts. Learn more at thegraph.foundation. That's thegraph.foundation.
Hi, this is GRTiQ. Each week we get to meet a new member of the Graph community and ecosystem. The goal here is to take listeners inside the Graph by telling the stories and sharing the insights of those helping to build it. Please consider supporting this project by leaving a review wherever you listen to the GRTiQ podcast or by sharing episodes on social media. And don't forget to visit grtiq.com/podcast for detailed show notes. That's grtiq.com/podcast. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for your support.
Roger that.
So that's what Scout has basically been working on and is working on currently. In simple terms, for a non-technical person, you were awarded a grant from the graph. What did you work on and where are you at in that process?
Sure, yeah. So we reward a grant, we're Wave 2 grantee, and then so we start working on this thing called a Bubbletea. It has nothing to do with any popular drinks from Taiwan. It's just a fun name. So we basically built a developer library. We decided to target develop first. We built a developer library to help them to visualize data, the graph. We basically sort of figure out a few key points when someone trying to visualize data on the graph, and then we make it easy for them. For example, how do you pull data off the graph quickly, easily? How do you visualize them? Some built-in components in the charts, and then how do you organize them, put it in a dashboard? So all these things require different components. We built a library to streamline this process. So that's how we started. So we finished the first iteration, and then we start building examples. So we're using our own tool to build examples, and we're documenting all these findings, learnings in a forum thread on the graph. There's something we were able to build. There's also things we need the graph to improve their features before we can build. So we found a bunch of small things here and there, and we're documenting them. We were talking to the product team directly. So that's where we are.
Well, congratulations on receiving a grant from the Graph Foundation, as you mentioned, Wave 2. What's your advice to listeners that want to participate and apply for a grant from the Graph Foundation based on your experience?
Yeah, so we basically, before we apply, we actually spend a bunch of time going through the forum, actually, see what people are asking. And then we sort of try to understand. Well, I think the hard part for us was to understand where it is in terms of technology, the readiness of the graphs. So if you have an idea, but it's too early, don't really fit into where it is today for the graph, it's probably hard to get the grant. Or if you try to apply for an idea that's already been built many times, that's also hard to get. Because when we going through the interview, talk to Reem, talk to Yaniv, talk to Adam in terms of the interview, it was one interesting thing. They said, yeah, we've got lots of people in the community saying they need something like this. So that's basically one of the criteria they need is like, hey, is it the right time? Is it now to build something like this, to fund something like this? I think that would be my biggest advice.
A developer that wants to get involved in the graph, start creating dApps, get more involved, maybe even in subgraph development, can they use this library? Is it lower the barrier to getting involved with the graph? Like, what's the utility here?
Yeah, so for developers who wants to, let's say, you want to visualize any data on the graph. Let's say you want to use I want to see the volume on sushi. I want to see how people are doing. I mean, there's a Near integration recently just launched, so I want to see how applications are doing on Near, like Mint-based or some other applications. So you can basically find a subgraph, or if they have subgraph, great. You basically find the link of the subgraph, and then you find the queries you put into the app. In a few lines of code, you can actually start visualizing them. You can basically build, I mean, many developers who don't like doing HTML, CSS, you can build a dashboard, just use code to build it. Just few lines of code, organize them. And as a matter of fact, we just start looking into the Near integration and see if we can visualize them and make an example.
You mentioned the forum post. I'll put a link of it in the show notes where people can read up on the progress. If people want to access the actual library that you build as part of a Wave 2 grant, is that something they can link to as well?
Yes, absolutely. We have a GitHub link, completely open source, open to everyone. People can contribute, can see. We also have a link of full documentations, and it's updating as we talk. So anyone can participate, can use. If they have any question, they can contact us.
Take us back to those early days and your early impressions of what the graph was doing.
Yeah, so the early days, what graph was doing was, I think, was quite clear to many developers. But it was not clear to people who are not developers, especially VCs or like journalists, they don't quite, because you do need to actually work and use a database to understand what is an index, right? Why do you need an index? So I sort of have to explain to people, okay, you have lots of clothes. You just throw it there. But if you're looking for a shirt, a pair of jeans, you sort of need a wardrobe to organize, put in the different drawers, right? So let's say today I'm looking for a pair of green jeans that I bought 2 years ago. How do you find them? If you just dump everything to one place, you can't find these clothes. So you need a drawers, wardrobe to organize them. And the organization of these data is called index. So in a blockchain world, the node itself, it's I don't know if you're familiar with the word linked list. It's a word for data structure. Anyone who studied basic computer science, the data is all sort of organized in a list. So to go one by one. To do any complicated query, such as I want to put the latest transaction of a shop. I want to find people who are making money more than $3 a day. Like all these slightly complicated, the search query, you can't do this on the node. So you have to sort of build a separate thing to reorganize them before people can use. So that's what Graph was designed to. I think that resonates with people who have some technical background, but still who don't know anything about database. It was hard for them to grasp what the graph was. Also, I also don't know if somebody else would solve the problem from a different angle. For example, if you're Ethereum node developers, like would you build a node that takes care of indexing rather than having a separate node right on the graph? And also, we were thinking, hey, would you be able to handle all these scalability and all that stuff? But that technical part, I was less concerned because I know in the past, as long as this is a good idea, you can have money, you have people who get behind it, the technical part can be solved over time. Right? 99% of them. There's 1%, maybe not. But most technical part can be solved. So that was sort of like early speculation, sort of thoughts I was aware of.
This is a solution that has to be provided for Web3. Am I right? I mean, somebody has to come along and provide this type of solution. So why do you think the graph would be in a position to succeed in filling this need?
I think today, it's getting clear that, if you look company like, there are competitors already. So people just start realizing, okay, it's just not a simple problem to solve. And you need it. No one's going to use a centralized database if you truly build a trustless application. So I think the needs is getting just so obvious today, and the technical challenge is high. And I think just Graph had a very early start. Now they have stronger team like Streamfast joining. So yeah, because everyone's asking, how are you going to handle fast chain like Near, like Solana? So even if you're doing in a centralized database, it's not easy to do as well. It's doable, but it's not easy. It takes time to fine tuning the entire system, let alone we're talking about decentralized. So yeah, I think Graph has a very strong possibility to win big in this space. I don't know if Graph is going to be the only solution, but at least they're going to grab a very meaningful share.
You keep referring to the graph as the database for Web3, which most people refer to it as like an indexing querying layer. That's been the common theme, and it probably doesn't conflict with what you're saying here, but your twist is interesting. Why the variant on how you view it?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the blockchain itself is a very simple version of database and a computer. Now the whole world is using it. But to actually scale it, you need to organize in a much more efficient way. We need something more than just a blockchain, like the Ethereum blockchain itself. So the graph basically, I think the indexing layer is a key part of database. You just need so many of them to solve different specific problem. When we building a traditional application using database, we're just building so many index. There's one giant index to solve a few common problems. Maybe 30% of problem will be solved by this one index. Then there's so many niche problems. You need a very specialized index to do that. And also, in addition to index, you also need to be able to package data in different way. Just using one simple example, let's say you want to show all the trade happening on Uniswap, but you want to display data not in the token number, but in US dollar volume. So you can basically pull data from the blockchain, and then you can pull data from some exchange rate and then mix them together and then display it. Or you can pre-package them. Every time there's a trade happening on blockchain, on the Ethereum blockchain, you calculate them and calculate the US dollar amount and then save that into the database, the graph, which is easy to query, which is fast and more efficient. So that's just one simple example. And I think we are seeing use cases like this happening every day. And so you just need an intermediate layer to sort of manipulate, massage these raw blockchain data. And that's what I call it, database. Although I think the graph still call it the API of Web3. In my view, I don't think it's accurate. I think the graph is also doing a lot of things more than just API.
What's your long-term vision for Web3 and how it might impact the world?
Well, I think Web3 will gradually start eating the pie that we see is being sort of controlled by traditional Web2 companies. I think finance is already happening. More and more people start believing how the Web3, the DeFi in Web3 will gradually eat the pie of traditional finance. I think social is also happening. Like NFT, the social token. So that's happening. And I think there will be more gaming. This is all I can think of. I think logging with crypto, with blockchain wallets, I think it's going to happen as well. And there's just so many more that I can't even think about. So yeah, I mean, I try not to think too much because I think my imagination is limited. And it just, when I try to imagine what mobile would become back in 2010, I was like, I just totally underestimate what mobile can become. So I would just stop right here in terms of what Web3 vision should be. And I think, the Web3, for the graph, it's just going to be the backbone of Web3. Imagine what the database is doing to Web2 and extrapolate that for Web3 and the graph.
Inevitably, a developer will hear this interview that's in the Web2 space and hasn't quite migrated over yet, but they have an interest in this new technology and what the graph enables them to do. What would be your advice to people like that who are contemplating this move? Yeah.
So the one common question I always get when I talk to developers in the Web2 world is that, hey, how fast it is, how scalable it is, how many people are using it, blah, blah, blah. So the one of the interesting underlying excuse is that, well, it's so early, maybe I should wait. But my response is always like, the growth you see here, it's not linear growth. It's exponential growth. And then yes, it's when exponential growth on a curve, if you cover the part that's going high, just looking back, you cannot tell it's going to be exponential or not. It looks like linear until it passes a certain tipping point. Then you look back, things become obvious. That's happening in so many technology waves. So I think you should not look at what is this today. What you should look at is the exchange rate. If you talked to me 6 months ago, ask me what the state of blockchain versus 6 months later, how fast it has changed versus in your world, in that past 6 months, how fast has changed. That's exchange rate is what you should measure. So it's a line rather than a point you should look at. And then once I do that, I think people just like, okay, 6 months before they talked to me about this, and 6 months later, holy shit, this has changed so much. So many things have happening. Like comparing to your world, how much has changed. So if you focus on a change rate, not a specific point in time, I think you will find a very compelling reason to leave Web2 and join Web3.
You strike me as a guy who's an entrepreneur at heart and looking for business opportunity. You were successful in mobile and Web2, but it's a different game in Web3. For listeners that are similar to you, they have that entrepreneurial fire. What would you advise them, or how would you help them understand how being an entrepreneur in Web3 is different?
Yeah, I think it's basically just stopping, sitting, or standing on the sideline, and you have to get your hands dirty, roll up sleeves. Like I just talked to a group of entrepreneurs 2 weeks ago. They were thinking about experienced entrepreneur, super good engineers. Like, Kuan, I'm so interested in crypto. Like I spent some time learning like, how should I get started? I was like, okay, have you bought a token? I mean, not from centralized exchange, from decentralized exchange. Have you bought one? No. Have you actually like run a node, write some code, interacting with the smart contracts? No. It was okay. That's a very simple step. Do that. Well, first buy a token from decentralized exchange. Get a freaking wallet. Run a node, testnet, write some codes. Just open a terminal, see what the data looks like. I think that's that very, very minimal first step. Once you get on that, you see it, you actually get a feeling of that. The rest you can actually handle yourself. Because I just help a friend on board on Ethereum blockchain, Solano, get it in the wallet, bought their first token, transfer things. So that's a very basic thing to do. Once you do that, I think 10 of 10 people, they actually don't need me. They just start exploring by themselves.
I want you to go back in time now and imagine that you are at that Ethereum conference in Cancun and you're able to bump into your younger self who was new to the whole space and had questions and probably even was a little bit suspicious of the whole thing. What's the piece of advice you give your younger self knowing what you know now?
Yeah, knowing what I know now, there's so many I can give to myself. But I think the first is to sort of forget about what you learn in Web 2. Actually, try to look for what's super, super native in Web 3. Like there's so many native things that's happening, problems, opportunities happening in Web 3, right? Like cross-chain, all these opportunities don't even exist in Web 2. So that was the only advice I give to myself. Although I don't know if it will still help because coming from Web 2, there's strong sort of way of thinking just stuck with you. And that's sort of how I learned it from my early mistake.
Kuan, thank you so much for your time today and all this really great information. If people want to learn more about you or the work you're doing at Scout, what's the best way to stay in touch? I
think we want to give you a GitHub link that has all the information you need, our contacts, Twitter, email. My email is kuan@scout.cool, Kuan. My first name, Kuan, @scout, SCOUT.COL. Yeah, that's very easy to get in touch with me. We just love to have people to get in touch with us, tell us what they like, what they don't like about the library, and we love to collaborate. I think Web3, it's about community. It's not about locking yourself in a room and build stuff. It's not about being closed. We need to be open, build a community. Let's work together.
This has been a production of the GRTiQ podcast. For more information, including detailed show notes, visit grtiq.com/podcast. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
Please consider contributing to this project and helping build the community by subscribing and leaving a review. GRTiQ Podcast.